generous about it. She says, hey, this might take a long time. So take your team, work on it all day, work on it all night if you have to, but give her an update on your progress by 3 p.m. You already have plans to go to a concert tonight. Beyonce's in town, and you're not trying to be working on servers all night. So with that, where do you start? Where do you begin, and what's your plan? And before I go into some of the, I guess, options for this, just to make it a little interactive, does anybody have any ideas? And Tamika, you got to be quiet. What's your plan? Where do you start with this? Anybody have any ideas? And I'm sorry if I'm not looking at the chat because I'm presenting. But if Tamika or D, I don't know if D's logged in. If you see something in the chat, somebody suggesting if you could read it, then I would appreciate that.
Nothing. Nothing so far.
Okay. Well, just keep thinking about that, and we'll go over a few ways that you might approach this problem. The first way, and this is kind of the old school way, but it's the first thing that might pop into your mind, and that is to log into each server one at a time and make the changes that need to be made. You're going to uninstall Apache. You're going to reinstall or install NGINX, and then you're going to configure NGINX to serve HTTPS. But then you realize that 3 o'clock is going to be here sooner than you want it to be, and logging into each server one at a time. You got 1,000 servers to get to. Remember, that's going to take a long time to get that done, even with your team helping out. So we're going to scratch that idea. We're not going to do it that way. What about another way? You could write a script that will loop over the list and then make the changes. So perhaps you're pretty good at Bash, you're pretty good at Python, and you say, hey, we can write a script to do this. And the script's going to run through this list of servers, and it's going to do all these changes. Well, you could do that. It's going to take some time to develop the script. It's going to take some time to maybe debug it a little bit. And also, the script is still, if it's looping over this list one at a time, it's still going to be doing the changes on the server one at a time, one after the other, and that's still going to take a long time to run. So that's a good idea. So we're going to scratch that. We're going to scratch it with a green, little circle this time instead of a red circle, because I think we're on the right path here. That was a good idea, but it's still not the best idea, the best approach that we can use. So what about another one? We could use a tool that can run the commands in parallel, or run the commands on all the servers all at the same time and get everything done all at once. Well, there's a lot of different ways that we can approach this issue. There's Chef, there's Puppet, there's Ansible. These tools have that capability to, offer you configuration management on multiple servers all at once. The thing about Chef and Puppet is that they require a master server to be set up. You also need to have an agent on each server that communicates with the master server, and that's kind of the way that the changes are applied. So you don't really have time to set up Chef, set up Puppet, and so on and so forth. So we can't really use those two. Ansible is a little bit better approach because it doesn't require a master server, but you still need to develop some sort of playbook that kind of maps out what you want to do. Remove remove Apache, install NGINX, and configure NGINX to serve HTTPS. So Apache sounds like a good idea. And we know that Apache also runs in parallel. It can also, I should say, Ansible also lets you do one-off commands, because that's really what we need. We just need something that can get this job done, and so we can be finished with it. We don't need a full-on plan, something that we're going to maintain from here on out to get this change in. We just need something that's going to make this change and fix the problem, and then we can move on from there. So Ansible is a good tool for that. It will do commands, one-off commands, and let you connect to servers in parallel and do that type of thing. But you also heard about this tool called Puppet Bolt. And you've heard that Puppet Bolt is very similar to Ansible in that it can run these one-off commands and tasks, and connects over SSH. And so you're kind of curious about it, and you think that it might be a good way to approach this problem. So let's talk about Puppet Bolt a little bit. Like I mentioned, it runs commands on remote Unix and Windows systems via SSH and WinRM. So yes, you can even manage Windows servers with Bolt. It lets you connect, and then you can upload files. You can run scripts. You can also run just simple commands. It authenticates either by a password or by a public key. And ideally for this situation, one instance of Bolt can scale to more than 1,000 concurrent connections. So we got 1,000 servers that we need to fix. If we're running one command, we're going to hit all of these servers at once, and that will definitely speed things up quite a bit. So let's take a dive into Puppet Bolt. And if I can go to my terminal here, this is the environment that we're going to be testing out Puppet Bolt in. It's a Vagrant environment. I've got 3 servers. I can't run 1,000 servers on my laptop. Sorry, guys. But I'm just going to run 3 just to kind of demonstrate how we're going to work through this problem. First of all, to install Puppet, it is a Ruby gem. So you would just do, gem install Bolt, just like that. And if you have your Ruby gem set up, it's going to install the application for you, no problem. I've already got it set up, or installed rather. So there's the installation point, and then I can also check the version. And I'm running version 0.21.6. Bolt right now is in a pre-V1 beta, I think is what Puppet is calling it. So it is available for general use, but it is pre-V1 for whatever that means. They're still working out some of the issues. I haven't come across any issues in the tool actually, but they still are not calling it a Rev 1 just yet. So the first thing that we want to do is just kind of get our hands around Bolt and see how it works. So I mean, of course, the command you run is Bolt. I'm going to be just kind of touching base on one server right now, just like I say, to kind of get a hang of it. And the way that you specify the servers that you're going to connect to is with the nodes parameter. And I'm just using IPs for this server. So I'm going to say 192.168.56.101. That should be web server 01. I think if I scroll back, that's going to be this guy right here. And then we want to, because I'm doing some funky stuff on these Vagrant boxes, I'm also going to pass it a no host key check parameter. That will keep it from checking the host key every time I run a command. Then I also need to tell it what user I'm going to connect as. Since these are Vagrant boxes, I'm using the Vagrant user. I'm also going to specify a password. I'm going to, if I say -- password, I can actually enter the password here, but I'm going to leave it empty so it will prompt me for the password. And then we finally get to where I can actually do some stuff. And I'm going to say, I want to run a command. Our command is the sub command that I'm using for Bolt. And the command, subcommand is run. And then I'm just going to say, hosts. What happened to my prompt here? Okay, for some reason my terminal here wants to get slow all of a sudden. Don't you hate live demonstrations? And you said you weren't gonna laugh. Let me try a new screen here. Oh man. Let's see if I can at least save some of that. Save some of that text.
No one is safe from the laugh.
I know, right? No one. Yeah, it's not even letting me have. Yeah, this window's gone. That's a goner. Don't know what happened there. Okay, so if you would bear with me here, I'm going to type what I had up before. I'm doing nodes 192.16. I probably got like a virus scanner going on in the background or something stupid like that. We're going to do no host key check. And then we're going to run as the Vagrant user. We're going to get prompted for a password. We want to do a command we want to run. And I just want to run hostname CTL on the server. Okay, run. What did I do wrong here? Command run. See, user password. It might be thinking that my password was actually command. So let me do it like this. Okay, there we go. So, I mean, that was pretty quick, less than a second. What Bolt did is it reached out to this server, connected via SSH. It used the user Vagrant to log in, and then it used the password that I typed in, which is essentially Vagrant on this Vagrant box. And it ran the hostname CTL command, and this is the output that we get. We get the host name of the server and then some other information about the operating system that's running there. So we've got a lot of servers. We still, just doing it like that one at a time isn't going to help us. We want to run in a way that we want to run on multiple servers at a time. So what we can do is in the nodes parameter, we can add 56.102 and then 192.168.56.103. So now let's run this same command on all of the servers. And send it the password. And it's connecting to all the servers. And I see it failed on the last, probably because that IP address is wrong. That should be 103. Okay, so again, less than a second. It ran on all of these systems, got the same information, the hostname information for each one of those. So that's pretty slick, right? I mean, we see how Bolt is going to help us reach out to these servers and run this command in parallel. But number one, typing or have this long command, we're telling it the user, we're being prompted for the password, we're telling it the nodes we want to connect to, we're prompting it or we're passing in this no host key check command or parameter. It's just a really funky command line to look at. So one of the things that Bolt supports is an inventory file. So what I want to do here is let's just take a quick look at what a Bolt inventory file looks like. So in the inventory file, we can specify different groups. So this would be the top level of and it's in YAML format, which is a pretty easy format to read. The top level is the groups parameter, and then we can give the first group a name. I'm going to call it web servers. And then within that web servers group, we can specify either host names or IPs, and we just list them, on as an array, as this is a YAML array, one on each line. So, I mean, I could, if I had multiple, servers, I would just list them all here on this line. Then we can also pass in, for this particular group, we can pass in a config information. And one of the subgroups for config is SSH. So we can tell it what user we want to use for each of these nodes. And then we can also tell it, hey, use a private key. Don't prompt us for a password. Use this particular key. And then I was also passing in that host key check or no host key check parameter. We can tell it in the inventory file not to check the host key for the servers in this group. Now I can also, if I wanted to, let's go 10. If I wanted to add another group here, no, I want to do 10. If I wanted to add another group here, I can add another group here, and call it app servers, and maybe that's a different group. I could change the user. I could tell it yes, check host keys on these, and so on. And then you can even get into more detail where you can tell it for each particular server what username and private key to use, and so on and so forth. We're not going to get into that much detail for this particular demonstration. We're just going to stick with our the 3 servers that we're testing everything out with. So we're basically telling Puppet Bolt, hey, my group name is web servers. These are the servers that are in that group, and this is the way that I want you to connect to them. You're going to use the Vagrant username this key that we're going to generate here in a second, and then don't check the host key. So before we can do that, we need to generate a key, first of all, and then copy the key up. Now, I do have a script that will do that for me. And basically all this script is going to do is generate a key, and then it's going to copy it up, or use SSH copy ID to insert the key into each server. Now, in our situation where we're dealing with these 1,000 servers, this would be kind of a faux pas, because this would be maybe like we do this over lunch or something, and just let this run. I did look into a way to do this with Bolt, and there is a way to do it using Puppet tasks or recipes, for lack of a better word. I could not get it working before this demonstration. I think for using things from the Puppet Forge is kind of like there, if you're familiar with Chef, there's the Chef grocery store or Chef Market or the Ansible Galaxy. The Puppet Forge is where you can download different pre-made plans and tasks and things like that to run on your servers. I did find one that would work in this situation, but you almost have to have Puppet installed to run that task. I haven't figured out a way around it yet, but once I figure that out, I'll let you guys know. In the meantime, we're just going to run this script. It's going to generate a key, and then it's going to insert the key into the servers. So now that that's all done, what we can do is tell Puppet to, first of all, use our inventory file, and then connect to our group. So let's see what that command would look like. We're going to say bolt inventory file, and it's right here. And then we're going to say we want to connect to the nodes in that group. That is the web servers group. And let's see what else. So now I can just say the command that I want to run. Command hostname CTL. Okay, so you see my command line was much shorter, a little bit easier to read, with just those two parameters I had to pass in. Then the command we want to, or the sub command for Bolt, which is command. The sub command, which is run, and then this is the actual command that we want to run. If I want to string commands together, then I can do that. I just have to enclose them in some parentheses here. I'm just going to say uptime. And then you see this, well, it's kind of hard to see that way. Let me do it this way. So there we get the web server name, and then we also get the uptime for that particular server. So that's just one way to string commands together. But we need to do a little bit more than stringing commands together. We for this particular situation, we need to do some pretty heavy lifting with getting Apache uninstalled, and then getting NGINX installed and configured. So I do have some scripts here, provision NGINX, that will, these are pretty much the commands. If you were to log into each server, these are the commands that you would need to run. You would need to, first of all, update your apt cache so that you're pulling the most recent copies of these tools. You would want to stop Apache first and then remove it. You need to do the stop, because sometimes if you try to remove it while it's running, Apache and Ubuntu don't get too happy about that. So we'll stop it, we'll remove it, then we'll install NGINX, and then we'll restart NGINX. So let's give that a shot, and I'll show you what that command looks like. And I'm just I'm going to keep this, because that part of the command is going to be the same. We're going to do a script. We want to run provision NGINX. Let me do this. I guess that's going to run it. Let me do this instead. Okay, so I just wanted to offer a little bit of commentary on this before I run this command. You see that when I edited that script, it's local. So what Bolt is going to do is actually upload this script, and actually I need to add one more thing to it. It's going to upload this script, and then it's going to run it remotely on the server. And actually, I'll go ahead and let this run. You'll see right away what problem we're going to run into when I run this. So there's connected. And what does anybody care to chime in on what they think happened here? And again, I'm not looking at the chat, so if somebody chats, then
Oh, can I answer?
yeah, please go ahead.
Oh, okay. So I'm assuming you couldn't stop the service itself as that user unless again, this is me being green on this one, but you couldn't stop the service as the user that you're logged in as.
That is correct. That's absolutely correct. Because if you recall from our inventory, if I can clear the screen and then call from Bolt right now is connecting as the user Vagrant. Well, Vagrant isn't the root user. It can't stop services. It can't uninstall stuff. So we need to tell Bolt to run as somebody else. So let me go back to my command here. And that's as simple as saying run as root. So as tell to run as a different user once it connects to the server. And you can, it's basically, it uses the sudo command, and there's another parameter that you can pass. If, say, for instance, the user you're connecting as requires a password for sudo, you can pass it the bolt command, the password to use to elevate those privileges. In this case, these servers are set up so that the Vagrant user doesn't need a password to elevate the sudo. So we can just say run as root and then run this command, and let's see what happens. Pardon me. Okay, so, and I will say that this command is going to take a little bit longer to run because it's actually running that script. It's first of all uninstalling Apache, and then it's going to install NGINX. And we'll see all of that, all the log of that all here in just a second. So that command took about 30 seconds to run, which was still, pretty quick. If I scroll back here just on this first server, we don't have to look at all of this text, but I just want to say here, like, here's where it installed NGINX. Let's see here. Here's where it removed Apache. And then if I go up further, this is where it, updated the cache and so on and so forth. And then it also did the restart. So, and this is, I've actually forgot one step in my script here, but I wanted to show you all. Let's hit one of the servers real quick. Let's go to 192.168.56.101. Okay, so we uninstalled Apache, but we're still seeing the Apache default page. So that's kind of a funky thing. Like, you would think, like, hey, we installed NGINX and Apache's not even there. Why are we still seeing this Apache file? And does anybody care to take a guess at that?
Sure.
Yeah, please do.
I'm gonna guess to say the index.html file. I don't think that gets removed when you remove Apache.
That is correct. So when I ran, if I look at my script, my provisioning script, I didn't do a remove -- purge. So any files that Apache 2, even though the service was stopped, the actual application was removed, any of the configuration files and files that the application created during the install, those files are still kind of hanging around. So there's still an index.html file that's sitting in var_dub HTML. So when NGINX is running, it's actually loading Apache's index file. On top of that, when NGINX installs, it would be okay if NGINX overwrote index.html, but when it installs on Ubuntu specifically, it installs a file called index.debian.html or something funky like that. So even though, and I should say, and then the order of files that it reads in is index.html, and then this funky index.debian whatever file is all the way at the end of that list. So it sees Apache's index.html file and is happy to just go ahead and read that and serve it. So what we need to do is get rid of either delete the original index.html file or overwrite it with Apache's index file. So again, we can use bolt to do that. I'm going to scroll back to where I ran a bolt command. And I'm also going to run this as root. And then the command we want to do, we want to move from var HTML index. Well, let's just delete it. That'll be the easiest way to do it. I was going to overwrite it, but I forget what the name of that actual file is. So I'm just going to get rid of it. RM, and I'll do a RVF too. RVF, don't need to do an R on it. Var HTML index.html. So let's let that run. And so we remove the index.html. Let's see what happens if we refresh that page now. Okay, cool. There is our NGINX page. So it's loading the correct file now. One more thing that we needed to do was serve NGINX over HTTPS, or make sure all the web servers are set up to serve over HTTPS. So just by installing NGINX, we don't get that functionality built in for us. So I also have ready-made, just like a cooking show, when they show you how to make a cake and then they just pull the cake out from under the counter and it's already made. Well, I already have an NGINX configuration file. Right, that this configuration file, basically it's the default configuration. What I've done though is I'm including just these self-signed certificates. They're in the snakeoil.conf configuration, and setting up the default server for 443 to listen on SSL. And then I'm setting up a default server on port 80, or to listen to port 80, and then redirect all requests to HTTPS at this same address for the server. So basically, this is going to force all any requests to HTTP to go to HTTPS. And so the next time after I do this configuration, get this configuration in place, if we reload that page, we should get an HTTP. We'll get a redirect. We'll get the hey Chrome saying this is a self-signed certificate, and then we go through that. We should see the green. Well, it's not going to be green. It's going to be red. But we'll see the certificate on being served through HTTPS. So let's do some bolt commands. This is the other command, or other kind of utility that bolt gives you, is the ability to upload files. So let's use some of the same stuff from last time. And we're going to run file upload. And I have that file locally. Basically, you specify the source and then the destination. The source is our local nginx.conf, and we want to put this in etc nginx / sites available default, because that is the default configuration. We're basically going to overwrite it. So Bolt's going to upload this file and save it to this location. One thing I want to say about the file upload command is that be very specific, or if you use this, be very specific about the destination, because this particular spot here, this path here on the destination is only a file. So if you specify a directory, then the command is probably going to, a directory that already exists, the command is going to fail. And then if you specify, say you think, hey, I'm going to write it into this directory. Say, for instance, if I just did like that, and I'm just going to write it into this directory, that may fail. So I'd say be very specific about the name of the file that you want to upload the local file as on the remote end. So we're going to just go ahead and run this command. And cool, so it gives us the information that it uploaded it to that location. So we should be good to go. So let me refresh the page here. And nothing happened. Anybody care to take a guess as to why nothing happened?
I don't know.
Yes, Tamika.
I don't know. I was gonna let Isaiah and Andrew answer, or Deborah.
Okay. Well, I'll put on the Jeopardy clock, and give folks some time. Okay, well, I can tell
Hold
you
on.
why. Oh, somebody.
Isaiah said services need to be restarted.
Exactly. So we're close, but we're not quite there yet. We need to restart NGINX. So I'm going to go back to where I had a command. I want one. Didn't I have one that was run as root? Yeah, I'll just use this line here. We're going to offer it a command, and we're going to say run systemctl reload nginx. So, I mean, we could restart it, but essentially we just need to reload the configuration. So let's do that. Boom. Don't even really, well, systemctl doesn't give any output as it is, so we don't see any, anything reported from Bolt. It just says that it was successful. It ran in less than a second. So now this is the ultimate test here. Let's refresh our page. And boom, okay, Chrome is acting along properly. It's saying that this is a self-signed certificate. We're going to say it's okay, Chrome, let us through. And there we go. We're serving over HTTPS on an NGINX server. So at this point, just through this, I mean, we've been talking here for maybe, 15 minutes or so. We've got a pretty good handle on how we could apply this to the remaining 997 servers that are part of this remediation requirement. So let's just assume that we go ahead and do that, and we get through all the servers. Bolt's great, it does everything for us. We have our meeting at 3 o'clock, and we tell our manager, hey, we're not going to go through all of these servers overnight. We are done already. All of these servers have, Apache's been removed, NGINX has been installed. We confirm that NGINX is serving HTTPS on all of these servers, and we are done. We're heading out of here at 5 o'clock, just like it's a regular day, just in time to get to Beyonce's concert and just, had a time of our lives. So that completes my demonstration. I'm happy to go back and answer any questions or do anything different if you guys want to explore things in a slightly different way, or just even try something else. I'm definitely game for that.
Yeah, I think Andrew had some questions. Isaiah and everybody, you're more than welcome to ask questions. I'm trying to
Okay, let me go see.
what I did notice is it looks like Ansible to me. Ah.
Yeah, it does look a lot like Ansible, and that's the one part that I didn't prepare for just because I didn't have time is I wanted to have Ansible versus Puppet type scenario, and actually, let me see if I got any. Okay, yeah, let me do this one. I think this is some stuff I did a while back, but let's see. This is just Ansible doing a ping against these same servers, and just kind of see how that looks. Okay, it failed to reach it, could not connect host via SSH. Okay, and that's probably why I stopped. One of the problems I have with Ansible a lot of times is it can't connect. I have to like fiddle with it and pass parameters or tweak something somewhere just to get it to connect. And I'm like, I didn't do anything out of the box, anything special with Bolt, and it just works. Bolt also does a good job of running or reading your SSH config file. So if you have like funky host names that are aliases for host names in your config file, Bolt is really good about picking those up as well. Ansible, not all the time. Of course, you can pass like here, you can pass SSH parameters to Ansible, and it will pick those up. Like for instance, there's the user, parameter that we're passing in. But with Bolt, it just kind of does it out of the box. It picks it up very easily. I'm trying to think if there's a way that I could quickly get. Yeah, I guess all that is to say is I'm not immediately prepared to do a Bolt versus Ansible comparison. Let me hack on that, and I'll get back to you the next time. I'm able to make it to one of the meetups, and then we can do a more apples to apples comparison, because I think that's worthwhile.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like Bolt is faster as
Oh,
far as the connection and making or processing the commands. I guess processing commands is it's on the it's on the server side. It's however long the server takes is however long the command is going to take. But in some tests that I've done previously, I found that Bolt ran faster than Ansible.
hmm.
Um, just for what it's worth.
And then in terms of uh, the config files, setting up the config files, what options do you have for both? I know like in Ansible, and this is not a comparison, but this is just a question. I know in Ansible you can do things like, your variable file, you have roles.
Yes.
What in Bolt do I, and I guess I should pull up what the tech preview is, like what future things they have coming, because it sounds like they're
Oh,
trying to go after the Ansible market, for as far as connection.
yeah. It's very similar to Ansible in that way, with a little bit of secret sauce, I guess, because Bolt is like basically Bolt is an add-on to Puppet. It's like a task executor for Puppet. So let's say you have a Puppet installation. You've got the Puppet server set up, you've got all your clients checking in and everything, and you need to run some one-off task. Bolt is the tool to do that for Puppet. So basically, what you can do, like you're comparing it to Ansible roles and playbooks and so on. In the case of Bolt, they would be Puppet, and I think they call them recipes, or I forget what the actual terminology is. Modules and tasks. I think they're called modules. So basically, you would already have these modules available or installed from your Puppet server, and you would run these. You would reference those to run against your targets using the Bolt command. And basically that, and I tried to do that a couple different ways. The command is it would be Bolt task run, and it's not gonna do anything because I haven't done anything. Or Bolt I think it's plan run. So those are the equivalents to running like a playbook uh, in Ansible terminology. And I guess Chef has cookbooks, but and Chef has the knife command. You can use knife to run one-off commands and that type of thing. But again, with Chef, you have to have that Chef infrastructure kind of already in place. But the one thing that I tried to hack, I did try to hack this. If I go to Puppet Labs, okay, Puppet has this thing called a Puppet file. I'll just cat it out. Oops. So basically, in a Puppet file, that's a way that you specify these modules that you want to run against a target for Puppet. Now, Bolt has this thing that you can do where you copy Bolt. This is just me searching my history, folks. Okay, so Bolt has this command called Puppet file install, where you can install this Puppet file locally so that, and if I go back, so that these modules are here, they're available for Bolt to use. Maybe that was too much. I'll just do ls. And so I tried it, I was mentioning that I didn't want to have a script locally that I ran to do these keys and, the key creation, key injection. So Puppet does have a plan or a playbook or whatever, if you want to call it that, called accounts. And it comes with commands that will basically manage accounts. So I wanted to add an SSH key to the Vagrant account on the servers that I was working with. And if I was using Puppet, this is the way that I would do that. So I thought, hey, let me try and do that with Bolt. And I couldn't get it to work. I tried to hack it a couple different ways, and for whatever reason, I just couldn't get it to work. So that's one more thing I'm going to look into, because if that's the case, then it gets very, very similar to Ansible, where I can download a role or put together some sort of Puppet file that is basically equivalent to an Ansible playbook, and
Mm.
then I can say, boom, run this playbook essentially
Right.
and and then kind of see how that works. So I'm still working on that, but once I get that all figured out, I'll be glad to come back and let you know those details.
Right. And then I think in the posting, Andrew said, he said, I've done a little Ansible once or twice. I'd be happy to participate in a shootout between Ansible and Bolt. I said
Okay,
there'd be a party. He said, I'm going all out with Women in Linux made the best automation tool win
sure.
on this, and we'll give away a $20 gift card to the winner. Put some money on the line. So anyone listening to this on the next meetup, you know, get with Team Ansible or Team Bolt, and we're gonna hack this thing on out and let's get this thing cracking.
Yeah,
Uh,
and I laugh because I mean, and we've had discussions before on automation, whatever.
right.
I I like it's great because it's agentless. You don't need this master server. You can run it from any terminal that can connect to your target servers. All you need is the key and the playbook. So once I saw that, I was like, the future is Ansible. So I'm at heart an Ansible fanboy, but I'm very curious about Bolt. So I will be Team Bolt if that is what it takes.
Oh snap!
All I want to say is, I would secretly be Team Ansible as well.
You know, if you need me to,
Exactly,
if
exactly.
you're looking for players.
Yeah, it's like public answer, private answer, right? My public answer is, oh yeah, Bolt will be pretty good. It'll be a competitor. But then private answer will be like, man, Ansible, yeah, that's my homie right there. Ansible, yeah.
But and the other question I had was inside of Bolt is, I'm assuming it's running it as the same thing as Ruby as uh regular Puppet is.
Yes, it is a Ruby gem. So Bolt can be installed independently of Puppet. And like for example, I don't have Puppet installed on this. I'm using a Mac. I don't have it installed on this particular system. So I just do, like I said, gem install Bolt, and that's just a regular Ruby command. So you can install this anywhere that the gem command is available.
Yeah, and then I think, let me see, I'm trying to go up. Oh, this is what I had a question on your scenario. Would it have been better? You have 1,000 machines. Would it have been better just to do like a blue green deployment where you may do 500 servers and then get those servers up and do the testing that you need and then do the next 500? Because I'm just
Yeah,
curious, like, would it have made sense to break it up, or would in that scenario, and I think this is something that uh kind of goes down into the system engineers integration integrator type of thing. I just wonder if that would be something that should have been done, or it's just like, you know what, we don't care, just do it.
yeah. So in reality, yeah, you're definitely going to want to have a little bit more control about how you're making changes on production systems and the order and rate and so on that you're making those changes. Yeah, this was just a contrived example, just to kind of set the scenario and get people thinking about, oh my God, that's a lot of
Hmm.
systems that I had to touch, and how am I going to touch, all those systems? But yeah, in a much more mature environment, you're definitely going to want to, think about how you make, this drastic of a change in such a large environment, and maybe even roll out, 10 at a time, 20 at a time,
Hmm.
build it up. Okay, we've done 100. Let's do 200 the next round. Okay, let's do 300 the next round. Okay, that looks good. Yeah, let's do the rest of them.
Right.
So that would definitely be a much smarter way to save from having to do more work later.
Right.
That's what I.
Right. And that's why I was getting at. I was like, this is a good example of, modularizing the actual deployment and breaking it up into pieces, and testing that out and automating your test plans and so forth, especially if you're
Sure.
making that leap to another web, or not a web browser, but another what's the word I want to call it, web server,
Yeah.
in that case. And then on the other thing too that I was also looking at, and this is getting into the weeds. What if with your HTTPS, we're making the assumption that those licenses were already there, and the config file for NGINX pointed to those licenses, and you just rolled it out.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, you said a lot, but yeah, I mean, all of that is stuff that you would have to consider. This was just like a quick demo to kind of show you the capabilities of
hmm
Bolt.
hmm
Um, but yeah, to be smarter about it, because in all actuality, the bigger change in this particular scenario, especially if you have an application running that's fronted by Apache, the bigger change is going to be the application. Like, how do you have any configuration that's built in that's tied to Apache? For example, I'm working on a project now that's fronted by, it's a Django Python application that's fronted by Apache, and Apache uses UWSGI, or if I understand what UWSGI is, the Web Services Gateway Interface, and that's built into Apache. And if I was just to rip out Apache and say, okay, app, you're being served by NGINX, that's not going to work, because NGINX doesn't have a built-in UWSGI module. I'd
mm
have to install a UWSGI server, get that all configured, get that talking to the application, and then front that with the NGINX web server. Or I would have to compile NGINX to include the module and get that deployed. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different things that you would have to consider in the case where it's a full blown application that you're serving. But I guess two more points. I just pulled up the file copy because I was thinking about that. I wanted to see if there's a recurse option or like a directory option, and I don't necessarily see that. I was just scrolling through that here. I'm not gonna get y'all dizzy with scrolling through that, but I did want to I guess share the real life scenario that kind of introduced me to Bolt, and that is I needed to run a script remotely on a bunch of servers, and they were configured. The company I work for, we use Chef to configure our servers, and so a lot of the change management or configuration management that we do on the servers, we use Chef. But this was a particular change that I needed to make to a Jenkins job it was like several dozen, say 30 or 40 Jenkins jobs on 2 or 3 different servers. It wasn't something that Chef could do. It had to be done manually. And I'm like, there's no way I'm logging into all these servers and making all these changes manually. There's got to be some automated way to do that. So basically, the script that I needed to run was a sed script that edited the job configuration for each job. And I used Bolt to do that. I connected as myself. I elevated my privileges with sudo, and then I was able to run this script against all these, basically, for I in splat.config.xml, whatever, and then run the sed command on all of these Jenkins files, and just it worked. And I was like, wow, that was pretty slick. I was pretty sold after that. I think I did try to do it with Ansible to begin with, and the problem I was having there was getting the script, or maybe not necessarily getting the script uploaded, but getting it run the way that I want it to run. And again, Bolt just worked for me, pretty easily.
And then Andrew had stated, he said there's a huge difference from Ansible, which requires several packages. He's like Bolt seems lighter weight than and already a lightweight Ansible.
Yeah, I will agree, because if you do a pip install Ansible, you're going to get a lot of actually. I mean, since we're talking about it, like temp env, this just be a little temporary environment that we can play with here, and I'll just do a pip install Ansible, and we'll just talk while Ansible installs here. What happened? Protocol version something or other. Let me try something different here. No, I didn't want to do that. I think I just killed my window though. Like I said, live demonstrations, right?
It's okay.
Uh,
That's what they're there
where?
for.
Yeah, let me go to back, get a new terminal.
And while he's doing that, any questions from anyone else or statements or what have you? Just from looking at it. And if you're not
This
familiar with Ansible, we'll do some things with Ansible, but I think there is a an actual demonstration of Ansible out there already that we've done. But I'll double check on the YouTube here. Let me look it up. Wow.
Okay, so let's see what. First of all, we got to download the Ansible package. So that takes a second. I'm okay with that. But then let's see what the dependencies start to look like. If I can get there, there we go. Okay, now we're downloading some other Mac OS stuff. Paramico, which is important for SSH connections there, some crypto stuff. And doing some more setup.
Do a yum install on that.
Well, no, this is my local system, so it's not going to take a yum. But I mean, I mean, kind of shows what gets installed with Ansible. If anybody knows how I can create, I don't know if I have Ruby env installed. Ruby env, nope, I don't have it installed here. renv, nope. I know there's a way to get Ruby to make a temporary environment, kind of like I do with Python, but I can't recall. Because I mean, I will do gem install, Bolt, but all of the requirements are pretty much satisfied already. So there's not too much more that it needs to install.
And I think Isaiah had a question. Isaiah said that um, in he's like go scroll up. He said
Yeah.
in the real world production systems, how do you work out the kinks before deploying an automation like this?
So really, what I would do, and kind of what you've seen me done or do in this environment, and let me get out of here to deactivate and go to my little demo environment here. Basically, what I did is I use a Vagrant environment, and so I set up a configuration definition for these 3 servers that I want to connect to, and I give some this is just basic information: the name, IP address, and so on. But the real key here is that I'm using for in Vagrant terminology, it's called a box or a box file. I'm using a Ubuntu 1804 box file. So in this case, I would set up a lab environment that's as close to the environment that I want to touch as possible. So if I know my production servers are Ubuntu 1604, then I would use a 1604 box. Or if I know they're 1804, then I use an 1804 box. And then I can, memory and CPU, et cetera, that doesn't have to be exact, but and a lot of times it's the operating system that you want to be as close to your production systems as possible. And then if you can set up a test environment, either with VMs running locally, like I'm just running right here on my laptop, but if you can set up these, if you're using, say you're running on AWS, you can set up a test environment in AWS and then test your commands against that. Like say for instance, you have a manual deploy process that you want to automate. You could take those steps, you could script it up, put it in a Jenkins job or whatever, and then point Jenkins at your test environment, not your live environment, but just your test environment, and try to get your application deployed and running there, working all the kinks. And then once that's all squared away, you might want to point it to your live test environment, test it out there, make sure everything's running good. If that's the case, then you move on to QA or staging and get that all worked out, work out any kinks in that situation. By then, you should be pretty mature and ready to deploy to production. So, you've done a couple of iterations already. You've done the local on your laptop or AWS or whatever the case is. You've done the live test environment, which is, I hope, the test environment that you're already testing your app in. Then you've done it in QA and or staging. So that's another 1 or 2 environments that you've tested things out in. And then you finally get to production. So that's kind of how you build confidence in, your ability to roll out changes to your environment.
And then I think there was one other thing. It's like, does this require a maintenance window and downtime? to perform automation? And I said yes and no, and I
Yeah.
caveat that why I said yes and no, just from my own perspective. My thought process would be is what happens if you're in a situation where you have something like this that happens and you're losing $1 million an hour?
Yep.
Do you have time? You will hope that you've already have a test plan in place, and so that way it doesn't become a problem. But what if you don't have a test plan in place? I get it. It's poor DevOps, poor, poor, poor team. But what do you do in that scenario? Andrew, you could chime in as well too, because I think at that point you're fighting time and money. So
Yeah. Well, yeah. First of all, and I apologize, Andrew. I'll let you. I'll do a Kanye here. I'm gonna let you finish, but I just wanted to chime in and say that anytime you're touching a production environment, just I mean, there's some ad hoc or one-off things that might not be that big of a deal, but if you're changing something major, you need to let the stakeholders know as far in advance as you possibly can to say, hey, 6 months from now, we're going to be changing X. Then in the next 2 months, hey, 4 months from now, we're going to be changing X. This is the plan that we have in place. 3 months, hey, 3 months from now, we're going to be changing X. Let's have a meeting and talk about how it's going to affect and so and so. 1 month from now, hey, it's coming up. This is the change that we're going to do. We're going to be down from this time to this time. Even if it's just like you're changing the IP or something, I don't care. If it's anything that could possibly cause a revenue generating or business affecting system to have downtime or go offline or whatever the case is, the stakeholders need to be notified, like I said, as far in advance as possible. They want to know how you're going to mitigate the risks. They want to know what exactly is going to be changed. So the more documentation you have, the better and in a better position you're going um, to be successful. Then if something does go wrong, you could say, hey, this is what happened. We rolled back. Please have a rollback plan as well. Um, maybe I should throw that in there because that's just one of those ways that you're going to mitigate risk. But because you've built confidence in them, showing all of your foresight and your pre-action and so forth, they're going to be like, yeah, okay, that's a tough thing that you're trying to do. We understand that problems arise, and it was this is a difficult thing to do. So let us know when you're going to do it again, and we'll take another crack at it. They'll be much more acceptable or much more willing to work with you than saying, if you just come up to them on Friday and be like, oh yeah, over the weekend your thing's going to be down, and then Saturday night it breaks and you're like, oh man, it broke and we'll fix it Monday morning. They're going to have a much harder time understanding what went wrong and why. So I just say, yeah, prepare and communicate, to sum it up.
true. Andrew, did you want to add anything?
Well, I mean, Michael stole most of my thunder, which
That's what Kanye does. Kanye steals thunder
in true Ye fashion. The only thing I would add to all of that, and all of that is 100% correct, right? Definitely have a roll-up plan, definitely communicate, definitely identify stakeholders. But even more so than just a backup plan or an execution plan is a communications plan, and have that identified before you go in, right? And this goes to the later part of the discussion here today. But engineering, right? Engineering is not just tossing stuff at the wall to see what sticks, right? You have to be able to identify a plan for achieving a particular goal, right? And they were saying earlier, you may not have the opportunity or the time or the ability to have a maintenance outage if it's $1,000 a second or what have you. In those instances, I kind of take the approach, and I'm never the last person to weigh in on this, so I kind of have that luxury of being able to be dogged and ardent in my position, because there's someone else who makes business decisions. I make technical decisions, they make business decisions, they win, they have ultimate say. But I would say that in a situation where you don't have the ability to have a witness window, it's all that much more important that you have that plan, have it in place before anything goes wrong, and follow that plan to the T, right? So if the plan is it gets tested in staging, or it gets tested in development, or it gets tested in Vagrant, and then development and staging and integration, and then works through a gated process, it still goes through those processes, right? And you may streamline, you may dedicate CPU resources to, all right, just get it through here, 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 and here. If it's not part of this solution, wipe it off the table. It gets put on in the background. But it still goes through all of those things, because the only thing worse than having a break in your 5.9, 6.9, whatever availability system is providing a fix that creates another break, right? And now you've got double egg on your face. You've lost additional money. And as Michael was saying earlier, a huge part of this is trust, right? So an I dot, a T cross, and you deploy a fix that's not 100% fixed and causes more problems later on. You've lost a whole lot of trust from your management, from your customer base, from everyone, and that's really a difficult thing to get back. You can get the server back, you can get the data back a lot of the time, you can get a lot of those things back, but that relationship that you have with your coworkers, with your management, with your customer base, that doesn't come back as easily.
I agree.
Very true.
And then I see you have your demo up as well too.
Yeah. This is one thing I want to add before I head out. I apologize, I can't stay for the remainder of the meetup. But I do have this demonstration environment available as a repo on GitHub. I'm still hashing out the solution. So, I mean, this is going to change over the next few days. So look for some updates here. But if you want to, kind of run this demonstration for yourself, then I kind of, I lay out all the steps that you need to run, and even a few, commands that you can run. The script that I use to create the key pair and inject it into the servers, I have that as part of this as well. And then, also showing you how to create the inventory file, using that inventory file to run Bolt. And then the last thing that I wanted to add that might even get you some cash from just playing around with a tool. So as I was doing some research on Bolt, I came across this statement from Puppet Labs, or I guess they're just Puppet now. And they say you can earn $50 by helping, them evaluate your experience with Bolt. So basically you go to this survey here, and let me open this in a new window. And you basically let them know, it's like, hey, before you started, rate your experience. And then are you looking to run a task or plan? I'm going to tear them up on this particular part, because that's what I was trying to do initially, or one of the parts that, I was trying to do. And then you give them your email address. After you give them your email address, you get a link to this document, which is it's a Google Docs document. And basically you use this as a journal. As you're using Bolt, you just kind of, you fill out your name and your company if you want to. And then you just kind of give them some feedback on how you use Bolt, and, just basically, let them know what happened. They ask for what websites did you use to learn about, and you can offer the websites that you listed there. You can list the commands. If you want to copy and paste from my demo into here, I guess that might work. I don't know, but basically, it's a lot of information here. But if you send this to them after you fill it out, share the document with this address, then they are supposed to send you a $50 Amazon gift card. I cannot validate that this is actually, a true, tried and true process, because I haven't done it yet, but I thoroughly intend to after I finish this little exercise of, getting everything, cleaned up and to the point that I wanted to. Then I'll fill out the journal and I'll send it to them and say, hey, this was my experience. If I get the $50, I'll let you guys know. And then we can just kind of run them for their money. And, since everybody now has an experience with Bolt, you can install it on your laptop, install it on your friend's laptop, and let's just go for it.
I'm down. It sounds like a Super Bowl to me.
right? And with that, Tamika, I'm going to stop sharing and turn
Okay.
this over to you.
All right. I'm ready.
Um, all right. And I will just say thank you. It's always a pleasure hanging with Will when I can. Not, I mean, let alone the honor of being able to speak and just share my experience with you and the folks that are here live on the session and the folks that are watching the video later. It's a great time. I appreciate what you're doing for everybody, and I'm glad that I can be a part of that.
Oh, and we thank you. We thank you for your help. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for
Yep.
presenting. Just even asking questions and talking. I know it's not easy for everyone. And like we say before, everyone doesn't need to be a rock star. We just want you to try. And this is how you learn. So this is a learning environment, and we thank you all for coming as well to for tonight. Even those that left early, those that watch later, we appreciate you. So now we're going to turn this over to me and Andrew. Andrew, are you ready?
I'm ready.
You're ready. Okay, so originally, before we said we were going to do system integration and system engineer, we're at that point. Which one did you want to take, Andrew? Engineer or integrator?
Engineer.
Okay, you want to aim first?
Engineer for 500.
Engineer for 500, Alex. Okay,
Engineer
so
for 500.
okay, one of the big things that comes up often in job descriptions is we get these positions that come over and they say, "Hey, I'm looking for a system uh engineer, or I'm looking for a system administrator, or I'm looking for a system integrator." And you say to yourself, well, what is that? And what is the difference between the three? And how do I know what those differences are? And so I'm going to let Andrew run with system engineer. For now, do you have anything you want to present, Andrew, or are you just going to talk?
I'm just going to talk. You know what? My laptop, I was on earlier. I don't know if you noticed, I disconnected and
I
reconnected.
did. I saw that.
Um,
It's okay because while you're talking, I'm gonna look up some system engineer jobs while you talk.
all right, cool. Okay, so hello, Women in Linux. Andrew Thomas, senior consultant, Red Hat Professional Consulting. I do not represent Red Hat in any way, shape, or form. Just here to be a benefit and be an assistance to Tamika and Dee and what they're trying to do to lift bring up the resources in Linux that would benefit everyone, right? Help the profession get better, right? So I put a lot of thought into this and did a little bit of research, looked at what the actual boundaries are for system administrator, engineer, architect, right? And that's kind of the three roles. Just so happens that kind of maps well to some of the other methodologies that are out there. I did some Googling, looked at how do you differentiate between engineer and administrator. Architect usually is a lot easier, but we'll talk about that in a second. When does someone cross the line or cross the threshold from a system administrator to a systems engineer? And it gets to be a really interesting discussion and somewhat esoteric, a little in the weeds. You get into well, what do you mean by system, and what do you mean by engineer? What do you mean by administration? And various discussions going round robin as to which each of those three words mean. System in general, speaking as a and I had and definition I want to use, and I try to commit it to memory, but it just didn't take. Basically, a system is a closed grouping of technologies to achieve a singular purpose, right? Or the definition I found was close to that. It's not exactly that, but basically, here we go. System is a construct or collection of different elements that together produce a result not obtainable by the elements alone, right? So I did do some research on this, right? And so I need a little timer how long I'm able to talk before I get snickered off. There you go. So for the administration portion of it, right? You look at it comes into a roles and responsibilities discussion, right? You have system administrator roles and responsibilities are singular to number one, a smaller group of systems, but also a smaller set of responsibilities for that system. So you look at, okay, we've got user creation, you got basic care and feeding of the individual systems. And I went with this definition because I found several, because it kind of fits towards other disciplines, right? So you have your network administrator, your network engineer, your network architect, your storage administrator, storage engineer, storage art, right? And so multiple disciplines, in my estimation. That could be wrong on that, and I'm sure Tamika will let me know if that is the actual case. So when you have an administrator, they have a set of roles and responsibilities that are specific to particular systems and particular operations on those systems, right? So, like I said, care and feeding, maybe maintenance and monitoring, right? Reviewing the system and ensuring its proper operation. As an engineer, you then get into wider scopes of the life cycle of that system. And I apologize as well, not unlike Kanye. I can't see text messages because I had to switch over to my. Yeah, so if someone could read text messages that are applicable, I'd appreciate that.
No one said anything right now. I am just looking up various jobs as system engineers. Like, what does a system engineer look like at Facebook versus Netflix versus something in the public sector versus something at SpaceX?
Right. So getting back to life cycle of the system and engineering of the system versus administration of the system. Life cycle, engineering encompasses greater end of the life cycle at both ends, right? So both the creation, instantiation, and the cycling down, right? The putting it out to pasture or there's a word I had for this. Anyways, how you get rid of that system, right? And so these are not responsibilities that are typically found with an administrator, that an engineer has to be able to conceptualize and has to be able to plan for, and has to be able to provide instructions and documentation to an administrator for, right? Because engineers not going to do that all themselves, but they need to be able to prepare follow-on courses. And I don't know if I've ever mentioned this before, but I was in the military. So on occasion, I'll just switch over to that mindset and just start explaining things in invading a country type terminology. Because there's very little difference between system administration and invading the country when you get down to the nuts and bolts of it. But if anything I say doesn't make any sense, once again, Ms. Tamika will let me know. So you've got these follow-on forces that need instructions. They're capable human beings, but maybe they don't have the expertise or the experience or the holistic knowledge, right? So engineers are able to take a higher foot view, if you will, of, okay, this is our system, but this system interacts with the network team, with the virtualization team, the storage team, with all these other teams, and we need to know inputs and outputs and how to interoperate in the larger system, right? Because every system is a system of systems, right? And so, pardon me, that's that engineering role. It is more encompassing of the total life cycle of the particular system, the interactions, working at the border of the system, the interactions with other systems that exist out there, and also a leadership and a guidance role to your administrators, right? Because you generally speaking have more of a team focus, right? Because it's all good if the web server works, but the database servers that the web server talks to doesn't work, that web server is not really serving up much of anything, right? And so having that team focus and what it takes for everyone to be successful is sort of where I place the delineation, and where a lot of the research I did place the delineation between an administrator and an engineer. It further gets actually less complicated and more a higher view when you start talking about an architect, right? Because you may have one architect for an organization, you may have zero architects for an organization, and just farm that work out to someone when you plan on doing a tech refresh or something of that nature, and you have a specialty goal you're trying to achieve, and that architect has to have a deeper understanding of the interactions between groups and technologies, while at the same time having a much more generalized view of the individual specifications of day-to-day operation, right? So I don't need to know whether you do daily backups or incremental backups or weekly, full backups and daily incremental backups, that type of. I need to provide a backup solution, right? And then you have that ability to configure that, salt that, season to taste as you so desire, right? So it gets to be very interesting, because you have these architects who've got 10, 15, 20 years in the field. They have their technologies which they've come up on. They cut their teeth on these technologies, and they have an affinity for them. But that's not the job. The job is providing as specific as you can, but still generalized in that it allows the customer to breathe and grow and change to fit their environment, right? So a lot of the architect work that you'll do will be, obviously you do requirements gathering, but will be deploy, test, modify, deploy, test, modify to get a shooting solution that affects the actual needs of the environment, right? Because need at that level, priorities shift, things change. When you start saying, oh yeah, no, the best thing for you is an entire, data center, high-end, blah, 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 at $5 billion, that'll give you the uptime that you need. You're like, well, maybe if we drop one of those nines at the end of that, 10 nines of availability, and what's the cost then? And other factors come into play. That's another thing too that's interesting about the architect role. At both the administration role and at the engineer role, you can stay primarily technical. I let someone else make business decisions. At the architect role, because you're dealing with these other teams, at a farther reach, you are dealing with management and finance and people, things like that. And they'll say a lot of times, I want that gold, the platinum level architecture, the gold level architecture, and we'll get a brass level, a bronze level architecture in there somewhere, depending upon what our last quarterly reports are like. I mean, there's all different types that come into that. And so that's kind of how the prevailing delineation that I was able to find in my research. And again, none of that stuff is set in stone, as Tamika is about to show us. There's one more thing that I wanted to speak to you all about. I came across this organization which I had never heard before. INCOSE, it's incose.org, INCOSE.org. And INCOSE stands for, where did it go? Anyways, it is a system engineering governing body, right? And obviously not nearly International Council on Systems Engineering. Not as well known as IEEE, right? But and I have done zero due diligence. They could be snake oil salesmen, but they did have some interesting. Well, I'm being real, right? I have not researched their provenance and where they came from and who's involved and what have you. But they do have this, what is system engineering? I just want to read this guy. This is the closest thing to a clear and succinct identification of the roles and responsibilities of system engineering, right? System engineers are at the heart of creating successful new systems. They are responsible for the system concept, architecture, and design. They analyze and manage complexity and risk. They decide how to measure whether the deployed system actually works as intended. They are responsible for myriad other facets of system creation. System engineering is the discipline that makes their success possible. Their tools, techniques, methods, knowledge, standards, principles, and concepts. The launch of successful systems can invariably be traced to innovative and effective system engineering. I thought that really did the job better than anything else I found on the internet of identifying that systems engineering role. And for anyone still listening that hasn't muted the sound of my voice yet, yes, systems administrators do some of this. Yes, systems architects do some of this. And that's the permeable lines that exist in the world that we live in today. But that right there is more center mass for a systems engineer than any other discipline that I would imagine, right? I would not read those words and say, oh, they could probably be talking about system administrator. Absolutely not. They could possibly be talking about a systems architect. No, not really. I mean, it does have the word architect in it, and there are architect duties assigned, but the soup to nuts life cycle, system life cycle management and care and feeding is center mass for systems engineering.
And while you were doing that, I went ahead and looked up INCOSE, and they actually have a sample exam on their page. It's 3 to 5 pages long. 5 pages long, and it's like, which system engineering process ends with a formal written acknowledgement that a system has been properly installed, a transfer, a transition, a verification, or a manufacturing process. I never knew there was a system engineering test, but now you know.
Now you know. Yeah, I mean, I did do some research into them. I didn't just click and read, but yeah, I mean, they do seem, everything I read on them made sense. It fell in line with what I already knew industry standards were, and I thank you for this opportunity, not only to address women in Linux, but because I've now been exposed to these guys, I'm definitely going to learn more about them. And if I found out that they are snake oil, deep under the skin, or I find out they're mustard and they really are focused on bringing the discipline up and making everyone better, then I'll definitely report back here. and let you guys know.
All right. And then EMF Industries is one of the ones that I have been seeing around for a while. They're the ones with some higher end salaries, but systems, software engineers, system engineers, PMs, architects earning 160 to 250. Of course, they do talk about some. Here you go, the Incos, and I just went to Indeed and looked up what what companies would be searching for that on somebody's resume just to see if anyone takes a hit on that, and they do take a hit on that, like they are looking for that. So it's it seems to be pretty legit. And it does, as you can see, is a lot of this falls on the engineer architect. um and it's funny, see, they say enterprise architect and then they say senior system engineer. And this goes back to my original point. I think sometimes the lines get kind of blurred into if you're a system admin or you're a system integrator. And I think the only way I can define the differences is if you're in a bigger company, you can probably silo a sysadmin from a system integrator from a system engineer. If you're in a smaller company, you're probably all three because you're just doing everything. And that's how that's just how I view. Some people may have a different view, but that's just how I see it. And I went on online to try to find out like some jobs, some system engineer or senior system engineer job, and it looks like you could be a system senior engineer from a virtualization standpoint. You could be that way from an automation standpoint, and again, it gets into different particular fields. Now, this one, what you see here, this is where we start talking about what's a system integrator. And then they go in down here and they break down the job description. Again, a integrated engineer is responsible for the development and the testing of control systems for engines using digital electronics and communications. That's so vague. They evaluate and test engine calibrations with software for real-time embedded systems. And in our case, a system integrator can be that. And then a system integrator can be a person that's taking two products and putting them together to make them work, which could be an engineer. And you can tell me I'm wrong on that, Andrew, but I mean, again, I think the lines get kind of blurred with that. And I wonder if there is a system integrator, uh, I guess like an Incos or something of that nature. It may be something out there like that. And then I wanted to show you like what a system engineer looks like from a Facebook perspective. I think, let me see, let's go with minimum qualifications. You must know Python or Bash, some automation tools like CF Engine, Chef, or Puppet, understanding the Linux installation and boot up process, and then just have some type of degree in the tech field inside of engineering and so forth. Then they say some pretty much preferred qualifications are nice to haves are debugging experience and troubleshooting, which you should automatically have if you ever installed Linux on anything. Experience with managing large scale fleets of hardware, including health checks and remediation. In other words, the health check of the servers, whether it's bad memory or something of that nature, bad processor or something. The processor's getting pegged, something like that. I'm familiar with the latest server and storage architecture and components, and that could be anything because you could have a warehouse full of HP servers or a warehouse full of Dell servers or a mix of Dell and HP and something else. So uh, the different components of the latest server and storage architecture could be anything. But one thing I do want to add that I have not gone on is the Gartner reports. And with Gartner, you can sign up for some of their stuff and get some stuff for free, but I think a lot of times they want you to pay for it. But on here, you can find out just, again, different trends, what's going on, what are people leaning towards from what their researches are. A good person that actually to listen to on this was Chalmers. D. What's her first name? I can't remember her first name off the top of my head, but she was on our podcast, and we talked about using the Gartner report, and a lot of people following them. I'm sure there are other people that people like to follows the trends and what's going on out there. But again, the Gartner reports is pretty much what everybody kind of tends to flow with. Let me see what they have on here. Yeah, see, you end up having to sign up, but again, they talk about a summary, the AI, intelligent things, or cloud to the edge, uh, conversational platforms, immersive experiences, blockchain, event-driven models, and it's all in this report about what are the top 2018 technology trends, but don't look at it from what the trend is. Look at it when you're talking about as a system integrator, engineer, architect, like what's the foundation of the infrastructure? Is it in the cloud? Is it a public cloud? Is it a private cloud? The security behind it, automating tests, automating tools. Again, these are things, just from my perspective, of just different avenues that you can go into when you're talking about tech. Anybody have any questions or any concerns, anything that we might have missed, or something you want to say, whatever? And no. All right. So the other one that I wanted to show was one of the big things a lot of people ask me all the time is, how do you keep up with whatever's going on or the latest trends? And that comes from a lot of different things, and I'm not going to cover all of those tonight, but I'll start with like how I started with the Linux magazine. I used to go to the bookstore and I used to buy these magazines. Oh god, that's not it. And these magazines used to be like $20 a pop. They used to be so expensive. Yeah, Linux Dash magazine. And you can see the Linux journal. But I would literally buy these magazines, and they used to come with CDs. And you take them and you get them home and you play with the CDs, and they have their little next, their little setup of what you should do and articles and stuff, and just keeping up with what was going on in tech and what was going on in other areas is this is how I did it. Is just looking at what people are talking about and what they're doing. Back in the day, also was SourceForge. So if you want to find out who was doing what and what open source products were out there, SourceForge was a way to find out what products were going on. So now they have articles on SourceForge. They probably had them a while. It's been a while since I've been to their website, but this is another way to keep up with what's going on and what people are doing. You can search for open source projects. You can contribute to them and go from there. So it's just another different way to keep up with trends and so forth and so on. Um, but if you have other things, and I'm probably gonna do more on the integrator engineer next week, a little bit more in depth, and then resources in which you can use in order to keep up with the latest trends. D-Zone is another one that I use as well. But I also want to um, talk about next week. I want to talk about how we take all this information, and we've done our research. We've looked. We understand negotiation, and now it's time to do the interview. And so next week, what I would like to see, and actually I'm gonna start recording.